A very warm good morning to one and all present here. I welcome you all to the 6-day webinar series organized by the Department of Philosophy, Agurchand Manmull Jain College in association with the ICPR, Indian Council of Philosophical Research. Today we have two eminent scholars among us talking to us about different branches of Indian philosophy. So now I request Professor Sumitra, Assistant Professor, Department of Philosophy, Agurchand Manmull Jain College, to propose the welcome address.
Thank you, sir. A very good morning to one and all gathered here. On behalf of Agurchand Manmull Jain College, I proudly welcome you to the ICPR Periodical Lecture Series 2021. Due to the pandemic situation, we are organizing the lecture in online platform. With great and pleasure, I would like to welcome our chief guest of today's event, Dr. Sreekala Nair, Professor, Department of Philosophy, Sri Shankaracharya University of University of Department of Sanskrit, Kalari, Kerala. She will be delivering the lecture titled on Nyaya, Epistemology and Introduction. Ma'am, we wholeheartedly welcome you to the program. With a great honor, we delightfully welcome our another chief guest, Dr. V. Sunita Kumari, Assistant Professor, Department of Philosophy, Madras Christian College. She will be delivering the lecture titled on The Concept of Moksha and a Bird's Eye View. I am very happy to welcome you, Sunita ma'am, because she is my professor. I am glad to welcome our Secretary, Shanti Mulnar, and management members. I warmly and respectfully welcome our principal, Dr. Venkata Ramanan, who has been pillar behind this event. A genial welcome to our vice principal, Dr. B. Makavi. I feel happy to welcome Dr. S. Manigan, Department of Philosophy, who has been the backbone of this program. I extend my warm welcome to all the heads of department who are gathered here to add radiance to this occasion. I'm happy to welcome Office Superintendent Mr. Ravichandran and non-teaching staff members. I also welcome all the participant research scholars from different parts of country. I welcome our student, Philosophy Department, AM Jain College. I hope the program will be great and successful. Once again, I welcome you one and all.
Thank you, Sumitra. Now I request our beloved HOD, Dr. S. Manikantan, Head of the Department of Philosophy at Agurchand Manmull Jain College, to introduce the first speaker of the day. Over to you, sir.
No, thank you, Prasanna. It is really joyful and amazing day today. Madam, today is the 4th day. We are organizing this program, the Indian Philosopher Day celebration, which has been sponsored by ICPR. And before I start introducing, I would like to briefly say about our department for the benefit of the new audience here. The department was started in 1982, almost 39 years, gone 4 decades, we have said. And it offers only undergraduate courses. Our principal has come. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. And at present, there are 210 students pursuing BA Philosophy in our department. The department has a competent faculties, as you know, and faculty members with a high degree of excellence who keep pace with the current development in their field of specialization. Even during pandemic, the department has conducted 2 national level webinars. One was conducted on 15th June 2020, national webinar on philosophical reflection on COVID-19. And another webinar was conducted on 23rd March to 25th March 2021. It was sponsored by the ICPR. Again, we conducted another national webinar on 2nd July 2020. We introduced philosophy in Tamil for the student benefit. And this is a brief summary. And so far, we conducted 6 periodical lecture programs. This is the first time we are conducting Indian Philosophical Day celebration, which has been sponsored by the ICPR. And we can proudly say that ours is the only department which has secured a lot of gold medal and university rank from the university in the Department of Philosophy, from other department from our college. And now I would like to introduce the chief guest of the day. I am profusely overjoyed to take opportunity to introduce our chief guest of the day. We have two speakers today. The words do two major things. The words do two major things. They provide food for the mind and create a light for understanding and awareness. I believe both the speakers are more competent enough to do this. Today we have a great scholars, stalwart and charismatic professors with us. The first we have Dr. Professor Sreekala Nair, Professor, Department of Philosophy, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit, Kaladi, the birthplace of Sri Adi Shankaracharya. And she is more competent enough, the apt person to talk on Indian Philosophers' Day, since it has been celebrated as an embodiment of Adi Shankara. Her lecture is on Nyaya Epistemology and an introduction. The second speaker of the day is Dr. V. Kumari Sunita, Assistant Professor, Department of Philosophy, Madras Christian College, Tambaram, Chennai. Again, the great legacy the college has, and where the Radhakrishnan has studied, and Radhakrishnan's, both are from Jain institutions. One is from Kaladi, one is from Adi Shankara, and another is from Dr. Radhakrishna. And Madam's topic is the concept of moksha, a bird's eye view. Now I will introduce the first speaker of the day, Professor Sreekala Nair. Sreekala Nair, a professor at the Department of Philosophy, Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit. She has served the university in various capacities, both academic and administrative, since the time of inspection. Worked as a professor in Nalanda University for quite a while. She has held prestigious positions like a member in Indian Council of Philosophical Research, New Delhi. She was a joint secretary Indian Philosophical Congress, a member as a NAC peer team, a member of a different board of studies, the faculty and academic council of various universities, among other. Some of the honors and awards she received was first rank and gold medal for MA Philosophy in Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, Andhra Pradesh, ICPR Young Scholar Award in a national level competition, the Best Coordinator Award of Bharatiya Mahila Darshanka Parishad, Shastri Indo-Canadian Fellowship Award by Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute, the Best Paper Award in a 4th Annual International Conference of PYTT held in Singapore. She has published books titled Analysis of Knowledge, Classical Contemporary Approach, Progress, and co-edited 2 volumes, authored over 60 research papers. 4 research projects were undertaken by her, has produced 8 PhDs and 46 MPhil. She has participated and presented papers over 200 seminars, conference, workshops, and also delivered 60 invited lectures. More than 30 seminars, conference, workshops, lecture programs were organized by her. Professor Sreekala Nair Madam has visited several foreign countries like Canada, USA, Greece, Singapore, Malaysia, and China to deliver academic talk, presented a paper in conference. Her area of primary interest is contemporary epistemological issues, Buddhist philosophy, philosophy of religion, Indian philosophy of language, contemporary analytical metaphysics, consciousness studies, Indian, cultural studies, Indian, and Indian aesthetics. This is a brief summary of the madam. And we welcome you, madam, for our program. Thank you for honoring us. And it is over to you, madam.
Thank you, Manikanthan, for your invitation. Am I audible? Am I good? Can you?
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. With may I request our principal, Dr. N. Anandakrishnan, Dr. Ramanan, to say a few words?
Namaste to the Department of Philosophy and Madam Sreekala Nair. I think we had the opportunity to meet you in the campus about an year and a half back. My memory goes back in the room, and it's so nice to see you. And I still vividly remember the few words that you spoke to us when you had visited us. And nice that you are online with us. As Dr. Manigadan and Dr. Prasanna told, our knowledge on the subject are always something which we would like to cherish. Thank you for accepting this invitation online and being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you, madam, and nice to see you. Namaste, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, dear sir, for your kind words, and thank you so much for joining with us. Now I request our first speaker of the day, Dr. Sreekala Nair, to present her paper. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Prasanna. Thank you, Dr. Manikanthan, my colleague, and I'm extremely happy to have our principal amidst us. Thank you for your presence, sir. I too cherish those memories of visiting your beautiful college, and your faculty is extremely good. Please do cheer them and promote their academic ventures. And this is my request. Yes. Now, good morning to all my young friends, and I'm extremely glad that Professor Paneer Selvam, who has held my hand and then led me through the wilderness of philosophy, is here. He will tell me what I have missed out. And some of my young colleagues, most of whom he was calling out the names, I'm not familiar, barring Prasanna. And welcome to you all to this small journey which we shall undertake together with the help of the Almighty. My throat is so bad so that I'll not be able to give invocation. Actually, in the post-COVID scenario, my health is not all that good, but nevertheless, since Prasanna has requested me, I thought that I should make it. The pulmonologist has told me that I have only 30% of my lung capacity. Nevertheless, all the lung capacities are meant for philosophy, whatever that remains. Theek. So here we are. I'm extremely happy at the outset to this invite given by my young colleagues to share some of my thoughts with the young friends, particularly the students from undergraduate programs. I'm not used to conversing with undergraduates, so do let me know if I communicate right. You can stop me at the middle, no problem. At the outset, let me tell you that the analytic rigor and the logical fervor of Indian philosophy, which I'm going to share with you, is something that came to be recognized by the global community only very recently. It is not even a century that the global epistemological community has come to recognize the contributions of Indian philosophers in this field. When I met Ernest Sosa, I think way back in 2013 in Athens, I did ask him, like, are you aware of the insights of Indian epistemology? He then quickly disposed me saying that, yes, I know Gangesha, and that is all that he said. Anyway, for centuries, there is little surprise over this, because for centuries together, these insights remained under the veil of spiritualism and mysticism. Now the globe recognizes that our sophisticated ontologies were subtly oriented by the epistemic regulators. As the famous statement goes, Pramana Dhinaha prameya sthitihi. Prameya, the object of knowledge, is always pramanadhina, subdued or under the control of the methods of knowledge, which are called pramana. So arguing in this fashion, we can see that epistemology can be considered as the first science. But quickly, I must add here that here we need to go slow. Why? Because there is a charge surviving that as far as Indian philosophy is concerned, ontology takes a precedence over epistemology. And if you look at systems, I'll just cite one instance. Take Advaita Vedanta, for instance. Shankara, for instance, has fixed his ontological presuppositions, taking insights, borrowing insights from Upanishads. He would is the slides being shown?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, please continue, ma'am.
So what I was trying to argue out is that there is this charge surviving against Indian epistemology that it has been functioning as a costume stitched out to best fit one's ontological presuppositions. I'll show you an instance. Look at, for instance, Advaita Vedanta, wherein Shankara has fixed his chosen ontological presuppositions that, for instance, that Brahman is the absolute reality, it is one single consciousness, so on and so forth. And having fixed this ontological presuppositions, he carefully picks up the epistemological tools so that it fits best or helps him ideally to establish this theory. Now, this is what has been visible. Now, I shall argue that this charge is actually based on a misunderstanding. It's a misnomer. Why? The truth is that, as far as Indian philosophy is concerned, there is no compartmenting at all between these two sciences, epistemology and metaphysics or ontology. Bina Gupta has famously, I very often quote this from Bina Gupta, wherein she tries or speaks about the parallel process of knowing and being, using the popular dictum, Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. As you all know, the famous dictum literally means Brahmavideva Brahmo Bhavidum Shakyate. The only person who knows Brahman can become Brahman. And evidently here, epistemology takes a precedence over ontology. One has to know Brahman first in order to be the Brahman. But quickly, Bina Gupta says that there is a parallel reading, or rather this dictum yields itself to two different readings. The other possible reading is that Brahman Bhavadeva Brahmam Brahma Jnanam Lebhyade Itiva. That is an alternative reading. Only by being Brahman that you can know Brahman. So first you will have to know Brahman in order to be Brahman. That is the first reading. And the second reading is that one has to be Brahman in order to know Brahman. Now tell me which precedes what. There is no precedence whatsoever. They go parallel. Epistemology and ontology have been conceived as one single science. And let us get this clear. If you look, I mean, there is nothing wrong in using the Western spectacles and looking at our own tradition. And as Professor Panirsulam beautifully argues, I do it very often. Even in this presentation, I'm trying to pick up some of the Western tools. But then, one has to be an insider, and then one has to be very, very careful about what is called the cultural epistemology, the cultural elements that invariably stick on to some of the philosophical concepts. I'll speak more on it as I travel ahead. Now, I have argued that these two are parallel sciences, epistemology and metaphysics. But procedurally, epistemology takes a precedence over ontology, because when I present the case, or when anyone presents a theory belonging to a particular school, as I'm going to present before you what Nyaya talks about, well, epistemology necessarily takes a precedence over ontology. Now, getting into Nyaya Shastra as such, Nyaya often is wrongly being conceived as a system, or Nyaya Sutra, the basic text, has often been wrongly conceived as a treatise on epistemology. And please wipe this misunderstanding here and now. Nyaya Shastra is not a book on epistemology per se. In fact, it is a text on philosophical methods, and epistemology is something that falls within it. And that is why Nyaya Shastra is called Anvikshiki. What does Anvikshiki literally mean? Philosophical inquiry. The very purpose of this Shastra is to look into the methods and the nature of philosophical inquiry. And Gautama's Nyaya Sutra, the primary text, the initiator, Akshapata Gautama, dates back to 6th century, and then some say that he is a contemporary of Buddha and Mahavira. The debates, the dates are always debated as far as India is concerned, and let us not get into that unless it, crucially matters or intervenes in our conceptual discussions. So the very first sutra in Nyaya explicates the primary agenda. In the very first sutra, Gautama enlists the 16 categories as how I understand the philosophical methods. They are Pramana Prameya Samshaya Prayojana Tishtanta Siddhanta Vayava Tarka Nirnaya Vada Jalpa Vitanda Hetva Bhasa Chalajadi Nigrahasthana Shodasha Padartha. These are the 16 categories. Often they are called epistemic categories, though wrongly. Now, let me also introduce another Shastra side by side, particularly since I am addressing students of undergraduate program, that is the Vaisheshika Shastra, and the primary text of it is Vaisheshika Sutra written by Kanada. Parallel to this Gautama's Nyaya Shastra, probably people argue differently on this. Has been tagged on to this Shastra, of course, till 10th century, till Prashastapada, they survived separate, but by the time of Prashastapada, Vaisheshika was, after Prashastapada, he was a great scholar, but he was severely criticized by Nayayikas, and in the post-Prashastapada period, Vaisheshika did not have leading thinkers to present, and by 12th, 13th centuries, both these sciences were clubbed together, and there is a reason behind it. And in Indian philosophy, we speak about the twin system, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya Yoga, Mimamsas. Now, the reason is that Nyaya speaks about the methods, and the Vaisheshika speaks about the ontological categories, and together they function as complementary to each other. Now, let me again get to the 16 categories that I have initiated. As we have seen, the 16 categories in the first sutra are considered to be the exhaustive list of the accepted philosophical methods. Now, when I have said that they are not sheer epistemic methods, they are philosophical methods. In order to establish this, I will just cite one category which is called Vada or argumentation. Vada occupies a prime position in Nyaya Shastra, and if you just look at the history of argumentation, Vada Nyaya, meticulous efforts were made to sharpen and perfect this tool so that the Tattva Avabodha that we get from the Vada argumentation is also perfect. Unless the tool is perfect, the output will not be perfect. So you'll have to keep sharpening the tool. As the famous saying goes, Vade Vade Jayate Tattva Bodha. Only through argumentation, philosophy has been generated in this land. Nothing happens in isolation. Of course, a lot can happen when in intuitive appeal to your pure consciousness, dhyana. But other than the meditative method, the other single method that would produce genuine philosophy is argumentation, where you stimulate the other consciousness, and together, and Richard Rorty has beautifully spoken about it, in the presence of the other consciousness, and I have my own original theory about it. How is it that the other has a hand in stimulating your consciousness? How is it that in the presence of the other, you come out with innovative and novel ideas, which you haven't even thought about it? I have several times experienced it in the classrooms. Most of you are teachers, you can also try it out. But then it should be, a genuine kind of philosophizing that you undertake in the classroom. So, vade vade jayate tattvabodha. Tattvabodha, philosophy, gets generated only through argumentation. And as a result, taking the clues from Nyaya, or taking the leadership, or following this Nyaya leadership, Bauddhas, as early as the 2nd century, I think, even prior to that, even prior to Asanga, there were Vada manuals written in the Bauddha tradition. So it's the case with Jainas. Also Vedantins, Vedantins, particularly the Vishishtadvaitins, have come up with, I have presented a paper sometime back on Nyaya Parishuddhi of, I think, Vedanta Deshika. It was a beautiful text. And why is it that each individual school should come about writing separate Vada manuals? The reason is that, they will have to subtly interpret the principles that best fit their ontological presuppositions. For instance, the Nigrahasthanas, the defeater points. So these defeater points get subtly interpreted at the hands of Deshika. And so that's the case with all the other schools. Now, other than Vada, you have the discussion on Pramana. The methods of right knowledge. The term Pramana, in fact, has two meanings. One is right knowledge, and the other is the methods for right knowledge. And this is something which many philosophers are ignorant of. These are the subtle things that you should learn within the culture. Pramana literally means both right knowledge as well as the methods for right knowledge, or means of right knowledge. So Pramana occupies a prime position within the discussion of Nyaya. So the distinction between Vada and Pramana is this. Vada was meant to convince another, while Pramana is to convince oneself. As the famous statement goes, which often Professor Bhatt quotes, Sadhanam dushanam chaiva sabhasam parasamvide. Parasamvide, in order to make someone else understand, you will have to resort to argumentation along with criticism. Sabhasa. While Atma Samvide, in order to know yourself, you don't have to seek argumentation. What you should seek is pramanas. Pratyaksham anumanam ja sabhasam Atma Samvide. In order to convince yourself, in order to seek knowledge for oneself, you should have pramanas. And again, there is an epistemic precedence of pramanas over argumentation. Tell me why. The primary reason is that epistemology has been generated individually. Unless you know it personally, you cannot convince another. So epistemology is primarily generated within the self, and then it gets communicated, or what is called social epistemology these days. The West talks a lot on social epistemology, but that is very part of our system. That is a different debate altogether. So what I was trying to argue out is that Pramana occupies a privilegious position among the categories, so much so that the very Nyaya Shastra subsequently came to be known as Pramana Shastra. And here we go. We are trying to address Nyaya Shastra as Pramana Shastra. What does Pramana Shastra mean? The method, the Shastra, the science of the methods of right knowledge. And this is what in the West is called epistemology. What is epistemology? The logy, the science of episteme. Episteme is, what is episteme? Episteme is perfect knowledge, or the right knowledge which is distinct from daksa. There is nothing called right knowledge. Knowledge is invariably right. So episteme is that is to be distinguished from daksa, or opinion. Now, when you talk about epistemology in the Western scenario, down the tradition, there were three issues that fall under this discipline. What are these three disciplines? And since the time of Plato, epistemology has been concerned with three major issues. First, how is knowledge possible? Second, how do you define knowledge, or what knowledge is? What is the analysis of knowledge? And third, is knowledge possible at all? And as you see, the last is the address of the skeptic challenges. In what follows, I shall show you how Nyaya Shastra too revolves around these three issues, quite like their Western counterparts. While the Pramana theories try to answer the first problem, that is, how do we have knowledge? The theory of Pramanya addresses the second problem, or rather, what is right knowledge or how do you define knowledge? As it's the third problem, the challenge of the skeptic is concerned. For a minute, never Nyayikas have suspected the possibility of doubt, and at the same time, they have tried to defend the critiques of Pramana best. And I'll also give you a bird's eye view of the skeptic challenges and the Nyaya defense of it. Now let us take the first issue. How can we have knowledge? Nyaya answers this by providing a detailed theory of pramanas, which are called the means of right knowledge. Prama, karanam pramana. That is one type of defining prama. Pramayaha karanam. Prama's instrument. Prama means right knowledge. So pramana is technically defined as prama, karanam, pramana. It is the immediate and unavoidable cause of prama. Now, as far as pramanas are concerned, I'm sure you must have been initiated to pramanas. In Indian philosophy, we have more than 12 pramanas being discussed, like Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Ardhabhati, Anubalabdhi, Itihasa, Purana, and so on. The list is a bit long, but Nayayikas accept only 4. And I presume there will be someone else who speak about this separately to you. So what are these 4 pramanas accepted by Nayayikas and why? The accepted pramanas are perception, Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, perception, inference, comparison, and verbal testimony. I will quickly go through each of these methods individually. Of these, Pratyaksha or perception takes precedence over all other methods. And why? Why is it that perception takes a precedence? You want to have a conversation with me? You can have, students, but then you should be very quick, because as you see it, I am a fast speaker. If anybody is interested in answering me why perception takes a precedence over other methods, you can answer me now. Is there anyone interested? Well, the reason is simpler thus, that perception is an immediate awareness, quite akin to aparukshanubhuti, wherein you have your contact with pure consciousness. So both belong to the same genre. Only with regard to the object, there is difference. With regard to perception, you have these empirical objects, while with regard to the aparukshanubhuti, you have your own pure self as the object. So this is the difference, where both have this virtue of immediacy. And what is the virtue of immediacy? That it has zero possibility of error. Because most of the, I'll quickly come to that, that's not all that true. Most of the errors are conceptual born. And perception has this minimal possibility of errors, and whatever errors that creep in perception, remember, can be rectified only by a repeated perception, because nothing else can help in rectifying perception. I'll speak. Of course, a perception is not foolproof. You know that perceptual errors. We will discuss it if time permits at the end. Yes, so what is perception technically? Indriya ardha sanyagasha janyam jnanam pratyaksha. Indriya and ardha means object. Indriyas, when they move out to meet the objects, conjoin with the objects, and this union, out of this union, the perception originates. So it is the awareness born out of the sense-object contact. And pratyaksha has been talked of 2 types. What are they? Nirvikalpaka pratyaksha and savikalpaka pratyaksha. Nishprakarakam jnanam nirvikalpakam. That knowledge which has no prakaras or no qualifications, that is nirvikalpaka pratyaksha. In brief, it is pre-conceptual, where your conceptual apparatus are not being put to any function. And all that you can predicate of such a perceptual judgment is that it exists, or existence is the single predication that you can afford to in nirvikalpaka pratyaksha. As in the case, the standard example is thanurva purushova iti. As you see something ahead in dim light, you say, is it a pillar or a man? I'm not sure. But one thing I'm sure, that something exists. So existence is the only thing that can be predicated of that. And saprakarakam jnanam Savikalpagam. The latter one is judgmental, where it is saprakaraka, prakara sahitaha. It is along with prakara, along with qualifications, and therefore it is conceptual, it is linguistic, therefore it is logical. Logic and language, they are two sides of the same coin. Early Wittgenstein, Tractatus, where you have logic, the language comes to play the role. You can put the thing into sentence, and therefore, the accompanied possibilities of fallacies all fall in place. But nevertheless, it can be put in language. Nyayikas argue that, see, perceptual judgments need not necessarily be put in language, but they can be put in language. Unlike the Bauddhas who say that language, perceptual judgments cannot be put in language, but that is a different show altogether. I have no time to bring in Bauddhas here. So the ideal example is Diddhoyam, Brahmanoyam, ityadi. So what happens here is, please understand this. See, the logical category, what has been observed as the object has been put into logical categories. Like, I am trying to put the object under the class of Diddha, shortman. I am not only identifying him as I am applying the class characteristics to the object, the class characteristic of man, subsequently the class characteristics of Diddha, and again, subsequently class characteristics of Brahmana. So this is it. It is the logic and language at function, and then you have a proper judgment in all its frills. Now, when we come to inference, and there is a lot to be, actually perception itself can be a course by itself. But this is all that I can afford to on perception. Let me move on quickly to inference. It's rather complicated, but I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. It is inference is a method resorted to when there is no object immediately available before the cognizer. The object is not there, but you will have to know the object. Then you will have to adopt an indirect method called inference. Inference is not as much resortable as perception because it is mediate, it is conceptual. So conceptual exercise is called for. Now, let us see how the conceptual exercises come in. What are the precautions that you will have to take to avoid error? Now, there are primarily two types of inferences. They are Swardha and Parartha. Self-inferring or inference for oneself and inference for others. What is self-inference? When I go to the bus stand, if I don't see my co-travelers, I presume, I infer that the bus has gone. Swardhanumana. I don't stand there and argue out. I just have understood everything. Now, Parardhanumana is procedural. You will have to adopt syllogism to convince another. Now, Nyayikas would argue that you'll have to have Pancha Avayava Vakya, 5-member syllogism. Again, there is great debate within Indian philosophical tradition with regard to how many members you need to have. Laissez-faire method, Occam's razor. You should have the bare minimum. Minimal is the best. So, each addition of a member should be logically validated by the school. Now, the Bauddhas would say, Dharmagati, for instance, would say that 2 members would suffice. Now, debating on this, Vedantans, I think, argue for 3. But Nyayikas, putting a full stop to all this debate, they say that, why are you wasting your time? See, it all depends on the capacity, the patency of the counterpart. The person who is listening. If the person is too short, you just need 1 member. Dhumavatvad. You just point to the mountain, the yonder mountain, which is smoky, hence fiery. You are trying to prove the fire, seeing the smoke. All that you will have to say is that it is smoky. Everything has been understood if the person is sharp. But we are talking about standard method. When we talk about the standard method, well, we'll have to speak about a 5-member syllogism. What is this 5-member syllogism? It's called Pancha Avayava Vakya. They are Pratigna, that is declaration. What is the declaration here? The standard example is Parvado Vanhiman Dhumavatva. Parvado Vanhiman, the yonder mountain is fiery. The second member is Hetu, reason. Why is it fiery? Dhumavatva, because it is smoky. The third, Udaharana Vakya. Udaharana Vakya is very important. That is the very spine of the whole inference. What is Udaharana Vakya? Citing an example. And again, there is great debate. Like, can you cite Udaharana in syllogism. But again, I'm not going into that. Yo dhumavan sasavanniman. Whatever that has smoke has fire, suggesting that there is an invariable concomitance between sadhya and hetu. Yadha mahanasavat. Mahanasa. As in the case of kitchen. In kitchen, we have seen the concomitance of these two, and so is the case. And the fourth is upanaya, that is application of that general principle into this particular instance. So is the case in this present mountain. And the last is nigamana, that is the derivation, the logical derivation that has been undertaken. Tasmada tatha, hence it is so. Now let me take you a bit deep into inference. Inference has been technically defined as paramarsha janyam jnanam anumitihi. Anumati is inferential knowledge is born out of paramarsha. Now what is this paramarsha? I'm going to define paramarsha. Vyapti vishishta paksha dharmada jnanam paramarsha. Paramarsha carries or has two components. Vyapti vishishtatvam and it is paksha dharmada jnanatvam and vyapti vishishtatvam. Yes. So it has to be the person should have the knowledge that the locus, that is the mountain here, should or is performing the duty assigned to it. What is the duty of this locus or the paksha? To exhibit the smoke. If you don't see smoke in the mountain, well, then there is no inference, or you can't infer anything. For instance, instead of smoke, what the mountain is exhibiting is fog, for instance. In that case, again, the inference becomes fallacious. And again, that is a very famous example. So the parvata, the locus, the paksha should, parvata is the major term. You know, in syllogism, you talk about the major, minor, and the middle. The middle is the hetu, the minor is the sadhya, the fire, and the major is the paksha, here the mountain. So the major term has to exhibit the smoke in order to pick up the very process of inference, and it has to be coupled with the nerve of inference called vyapti. What is vyapti? Yatra yatra dhumaha tatra tatra vanhiriti sahacharya niyamo vyaptihi. So vyapti is speaking about the invariable concomitance of these two, that is sadhya and the hetu, the reason and the thing to be proved. Here, the fire. So there has to be an invariable concomitant. There should not be one single counter instance where there is smoke but no fire. See, if you remember the other, if you notice the other way, argument would be a failure. If you argue that wherever there is fire, there is smoke, you can't argue it because it is a conditional relation. In order to produce smoke, the fire should have ardrendhana samyoga, the wet fuel conjoinment. So this is the paksha dharmada. So in brief, anumana is that method which involves an inferential leap. As I do not know how much of Western logic you have been introduced to. If you have been introduced to induction and the standard scientific method, I'm sure Prasanna might be teaching you on scientific methods. Well, you'll speak about the flaws of inferential leap. By saying 1,000 instances, you can't jump into the conclusion that the 1,000 and the first instance would be so. This is what is called the inferential leap. This inferential leap is involved in this. And anyone who lays their hands on inference as an epistemic tool, therefore, should be very cautious to close this gap of the possibilities of arriving at a fallacious inference. Now, I'll also speak about it. Now, the types of inferences are Purvavat, Sheshavat, and Samanyato Drishta. Purvavat is inferring prior. Seeing the dark clouds, you infer the rain. Sheshavat is seeing the wet roads, you infer that rains would have happened. Samanyato Drishta is seeing the horns, you infer the hooves of the animal. Now, it can further be divided as Kevala Anvaya, Kevala Vyatireki, and Anvaya Vyatireki is, based on the agreement in presence and an agreement in absence and agreement in both. That is where, which is fixed on, it's based on the relation between the sadhya and the hetu. Now, I'll speak about inferential fallacies quickly and then wind up with inference. I do not know whether in Western logic is part of your course, where you would have studied, if it is so, you would have studied about fallacies of inference. In Western logic, we speak separately on fallacies of inference and fallacies of reason. But in India, we speak only about fallacies of reason, and that function as fallacies of inference as well. Now, what are the fallacies of reason? Or what are the fallacious reason? What are the defects that can befallen on reason? Now, they are of 4 types, but there are subdivisions. Asiddha. Asiddha hetu is unproved hetu. For instance, there is Ashraya Asiddha. If Paksha itself is unreal, for instance, Golden Mountain. If you talk about Golden Mountain haze fire, then there is Ashraya Asiddha problem. And then you have the Swarupa Asiddha. If hetu cannot exist in Paksha at all, the nature of the hetu and the Paksha is so distinct that it cannot, for instance, smoke cannot exist in water. Vyapyatva siddha. If hetu is conditional, as I've spoken about the relation between dhuma, vani and dhuma, the other way relation. This is conditional. And the second category is savyabhijara. It is deviant reason. What is the irregular hetu? It again has 3 types. Sadharana, where the hetu is, it is very similar to the fallacies of definition in the West. You have the hetu when the hetu is too wide, spreading itself to both sapaksha and vipaksha. What is sapaksha? Sandigdha sadhyavan sapaksha, where you can prove the possibility of the sadhya. Vipaksha is where you cannot have the possibility of the sadhya. So where it has been spread to both sapaksha and vipaksha, that is sadharana. Asadharana is where the hetu is too narrow. It exclusively present only in the paksha. There is no single another instance to cite. There can't be an udaharana, for instance. And also anupasamhari is, where it is omnipresent, it is universally present. Again, it is not an empirical entity at all that way. And the third category is sat pratipaksha. Actually, it is 5, of course, I'm sorry. Sat pratipaksha, where the hetu is contradicted by another hetu, which is a defeater. So if there is a defeater to the reason, it is sat pratipaksha. And bajada is, it's been affected, it has been challenged, a reason which has been challenged. And viruddha is a reason which is aimed to prove something, proves just the opposite of what is to be proved. So that is a viruddha hetu. These 4 function as the fallacies of inference. Now when we come to upamana, it's simple, its narration is simple, but let me tell you that Nyayikas have sweat a lot to establish this method as an independent method. And what is upamana? It is analogy, as you know. It is trying to understand a strange thing, an unknown thing, by employing the method of comparison. The standard example is that of a city man going to the forest, seeing an animal which is quite similar to cow, and then remembering the sentence of his friend that goes adrisho gavayaha. If you go to the forest, you will see a cow-like animal, and it's no cow, it is gavaya. Then he identifies this animal as gavaya. Now, there are a lot of discussion on this. A lot of people, for instance, Bauddhas say that it can be reduced to the other existing methods. But Nyayikas would say that it can't be perceptual. It can't be perceptual because there is no immediacy. What has been immediately perceived is not the cow or something else. And also, it doesn't have the vyapti relation. So the vyapti doesn't function, so it can't be reduced to inference as well. So there has to have a separate method called upamana. Now, the last one is shabda bodha. Aptavakyo shabda, that is the definition. Who is an apta? Aptavakyo shabda. Shabda is the information received from an authority. Apta is an authority. A person, who is a genuine informant. Now, the task at hand is to locate this genuine informant if you want to have the right knowledge. Again, it speaks of 2 types of shabda, that is Vaidika shabda and Laukika shabda. Vaidika is the Vedic, which is infallible, and empirical, the transcendental and the empirical. The empirical ones are fallible, and therefore one has to go slow, be very, very, very careful. And Laukika shabda, when you talk about Laukika shabda, they insist that in order for a sentence to qualify as a piece of information, it has to fulfill 4 conditions. What are they? Akanksha, Yogyada, Sanidhi, and Tatparya. Akanksha is, when the first word has been narrated, there are questions, I'll address it later. When the first word has been narrated, it should create a curiosity. Like when I say the door, and then you say, what has happened to the door? Is it shut or open? Akanksha. Yogyada is, the words placed in the sentence should be capable of raising a common understanding. For instance, Vanana Sinchati, I fire with water. Now, firing and watering cannot go together in a sentence. It doesn't give a meaningful sentence. Sanidhi is, proximity. If I say fire and after half an hour I say something else, then you don't understand the meaning. Sanidhi, proximity. Tatparya is the general intention. If you come dressed funny and then I say, what a beautiful dress. The intention is that you have dressed, it is not, I'm sarcastically trying to say that you have dressed in a foul fashion. Please go and remove your dress. This is the interest. Now let us take up the second issue that epistemology addresses. I have now clearly analyzed the first problem, how knowledge has been arrived at, enlisting the pramanas, and now I am taking you to the second problem addressed by epistemology. How it is knowledge, how we can define knowledge, or what is the analysis of knowledge in Pramana Shastra. This attempt is called analysis of knowledge and initiated by Plato and us, Theaetetus. I do not know whether you read Theaetetus, and my appeal to Prasanna and Manikantan is, please include these basic texts into the syllabus. Let the children read the originals and have this understanding of the fundamental problems. And Theaetetus, Plato initiates 2 types of definition on knowledge, that is formal and material. In the first method, he is trying to address the conditions a sentence has to fulfill in order to be a case of knowledge. He speaks about 3 conditions: truth, belief, and then accountability or logos. And with regard to logos, Theaetetus fails to define what logos is, and you see Socrates dropping the dialogue then and there without that Socrates doesn't surveys. He just answers, he just counters. So he doesn't come forward with any definition for logos, and therefore it has been dropped. But with regard to the second attempt, that is the material version, he is serious. Here he is talking about what could be the objects of knowledge. And therein he says that these photocopies that you see in the empirical world can't be the objects of knowledge. Here you are confined to doxa. And in order to have episteme, you should have the knowledge of forms. Let me drop Plato then and there, though he is very, very interesting, and come back to Nyaya Shastra. Now, what I'm trying to drive at us, I'm trying to pursue the formal method which has been pursued in Western epistemology, wherein we fix the necessary and sufficient conditions for S, an agent, to know that P, a proposition. What are the conditions? They are tripartite. P is true, S believes that P, and S is justified in believing that P. And popularly they are called JTB analysis or tripartite analysis. Now, does Nyaya define knowledge as a JTB? Heated debate ran among philosophers during 80s and early 90s when I was doing my PhD at that time. Karl Potter, Matilal, Shibajivan Bhattacharya, Jain Mahante, Billy Moria, Sandhya Basu, to list some of them who were the leading contributors or the leading participants of this debate, and volumes of ICPR were filled with papers of them on this particular topic during that time. And most of them felt that the discussion on pramana and pramanya can be juxtaposed to the JTB analysis, but with notes, write this in golden letters, with notes on underlying cultural disparities. Now let me initiate the discussion drawing before you the disparities between the 2 terms jnana and prama. Now, jnana and prama both refer to knowledge, but they are not identical. They can't be used synonymously. There is a genus-species relation between the 2. Jnana is an attempted cognition, while prama is episteme proper, impregnated with truth. And while jnana stands for all kinds of cognition, irrespective of the question of truth or falsehood, It is simply an act of awareness. In fact, any act of awareness which has intentionality constitutes a jnana. And jnana can further divided be into two, Smriti and Anubhava. Smriti is, memory, and it can't be knowledge per se, because there is no novelty, because we are naturalists, and anything what is called knowledge should give us fresh knowledge. Since Smriti doesn't have novelty, it is no knowledge. And Anubhava, again, gets divided into two, Yadhartha and Ayadhartha, real and the unreal. And Yadhartha Anubhava is what has been defined as Brahma, or true knowledge. What is Yadhartha Anubhavaha? To cognize a piece of silver lying before you as silver. Purovartini rajate, itam rajatam iti pratitihi. If you identify the silver lying before you as silver, it is Yadhartha Anubhava. If you identify the sukta, the shell lying before you, a shell lying before you as silver, then that is not Brahma, it is Brahma. It is false knowledge, or Ayadhartha Anubhava. Now, Brahma designates only true cognition, as we have seen. The very etymology of Brahma is pra-ma. Pra, the prefix, suggests prakrishtam, that which is great, excellent. And it is the perfect measuring of ma, means knowledge, measuring. So it is a perfect measurement, which means knowledge, cognition attached with, conjoined with truth. Hence, Brahma literally means a perfect measure, a true cognitive awareness. And in fact, Brahma is a process initiated by motion of doubt. One should have interest in the object lying before you, and with that, what is it? And then it arrives at, or the journey ends when you have a judgment at hand, that you stop with Nirnaya. It is the truth-hitting character of the episode that turns the cognitive episode into a knowledge episode. Now, is Brahma prepositional? The plain answer is no. Over and above the sentence and its reference, Nyaya doesn't refer to an intermediate entity called preposition, because we are naturalists. Prasanna, how much of time do I have?
Ma'am, maybe another 15 to 20 minutes.
I have time. Okay, then.
15 minutes? Yes.
All right, I'll surely wind up within 15 minutes.
Yes, thank you.
So we are addressing the problem whether Brahma is prepositional. What is preposition? For the young friends, excuse me, the senior professors, what is a preposition? Preposition is a logical representation of a sentence. See, you can't have a sentence as participant in an epistemic or logical engagement. So you need a logical representation of it. What is wrong with sentences? Sentences are contextual, they are empirical. So you can't have, so you need a logical representation of sentences, and they are called prepositions. And where do these prepositions exist? Only in the minds of the stupid philosophers, nowhere else. But Indian philosophers were not willing to have or invite or multiple entities to interpret. The primary job of a philosopher is to interpret what is given, and he is not supposed to multiply the problems. And as Aristotle has standardly criticized Plato for having multiplied the problems, so he has invited the forms also when he was asked to interpret the given word. Anyway, so we do not believe, or we do not characterize prepositions for good or bad. While Jain Mohande has a slightly different opinion on it, but then I'm not getting into it. So over and above the sentence and its reference, there is no intermediate entity called preposition, which has been conceived as the logical representation of truth bearers. Because Nyaya doesn't subscribe to formal logic. Why we do not subscribe to formal logic? The reason is simple, that in our semiotics, the signs are all natural signs. We do not adopt formal signs. Why we do not adopt formal signs? Look at the instance that I have cited in the infinite Dhuma. Reason is a natural sign. There is nothing formal about it. I don't want to get into the semiotics as such, but then, these are all very, very, very significant when you come to philosophy of science. By the way, I must also bring to your notice that Dharmakirti points out that syllogism, Indian syllogism, is no attempt of inference. In fact, it is a method in philosophy of science. It's a scientific method. That is what Dharmakirti sees the role of syllogism. is to provide a type of scientific explanation according to Dharmakirti. Let that stay. So we were talking about Indian semiotics. In Indian semiotics, we have only natural science. Dhuma is a natural science. Being thoroughgoing naturalist, Nyaya wouldn't find virtue in constituting formal entities which are non-existing. So in our endeavor to juxtapose DTB analysis to Nyaya Pramana theory, the first condition, namely truth, easily come in. For Jnana characterized with truth is titled as Brahma. And the prime condition is Yadhardham Jnanam Sa Pramitiriti. Now the difference between Prama and Aprama is this, that though both are awareness and both have the ability to manifest the general, that is Samanya Parchedagatva, Prama carries a certain distinguishing characteristics. And what are these distinguishing characteristics which make Prama distinct from the rest of the cognition? Now, the concept of truth seems to have underwent an evolution. I'll quickly sum up that. For instance, Vatsyayana, the Bhashyakara, has defined Prama as Yadhardham Jnanam Sa Pramitiriti, true awareness. And later, Udayanacharya in 10th century has redefined it as that. And, the first definition of Vatsyayana can be juxtaposed to the classical classical correspondence. Now, Udayana comes up with a refined definition. Tadvaditat prakaragam jnanam yadhardham. Now, to know a thing truly is to know it as characterized by what has been characteristic of it. It's quite similar to akin to Wittgenstein's picture theory. And lastly, Gangesha in Navnyaya tradition has argued given a minimal definition of truth. Etra yadasti tatra tasya anubhavaha prama. Where there is an object, experience of that it's a minimal definition of truth, and therefore I have juxtaposed it with the minimal correspondence prevalent in contemporary times. Now, talk about, so truth can easily be settled, but when we come to belief, is there something called a belief element in engaged in Pramana Shastra? Evidently, we don't see belief. Why? The reason is simple. Belief is a mental state, while Prama is an episode, a cognitive event. Once again, the play of naturalistic undertone in Indian epistemology becomes visible here. It restricts the involvement of psychological components like belief. Belief is, something which is enduring, while Prama is an event. It is an epistemic event that happens in space and time. Well, but nevertheless, you can say that since we talk about asandigdhatva or nischaya jnana, or nischayatva as characteristics of knowledge, we can say that some way belief has been incorporated. When we come to justification, the third condition, it is very crucial, and you know that justification has been so tricky, causing what is called the Gettier problem. Now we talk about two types of justification, internalistic and externalistic justification. What is internalistic justification? Where you speak about evidence being available immediately to the cognizer, that is, the cognizer has access to the evidences, while externalistic justification is, there is justification happens outside the scope of a person. Now, what happens in Pramana theory is that while internalism speaks about because, externalism speaks about cause. And in Pramanya, what happens, this cause and because gets rolled up into one single entity. And if at all we can call or name Pramanya as justification, I'm doubtful about it. If at all we want to title Pramanya as justification, it is a combination of both cause and because. The discussion of Pramanya is a huge chapter. I'll try to sum it up very quickly for you. At the first stage, you're talking about cognition. How is it that you have cognition of this glass of water? But how do I know that I cognize? We speak about two types of it: self-awareness and extrinsic awareness. Now, self-awareness, or what is called Swaprakashavada, holds that cognition is self-revelatory. As I know this glass, I also cognize the cognition of it parallelly. It is self-revelatory, And the extrinsic awareness demands that there should be yet another process that has to take place in order for this cognition to be revealed to it. Now, the Swaprakasha takes three forms. The Swaprakasha Vada of Prabhakara school. Dharmakirti, when it comes to Dharmakirti, it's called Swasamvedana. And when it comes to yet another school of Shalikanatha, it's called Triputi Pratyakshadavada. That is, cognition parallelly reveals three things. That is, the object, itself, and the self. Now, the extrinsic awareness demands that when C1 arises, it apprehends only a thing A or the preposition B, and we need yet another process C2 to apprehend C1. Now, again, there are three theories that fall under it. One is called Anuvyavasaya, subscribed by Nyaya, which says Anu means paschat. There has to be a Vyavasaya, an exercise posterior to cognition in order to cognize this cognition. Nyatadavada of Bhatta says that, at every time you cognize, there is a tingedness that takes place with the object, which inferentially makes us aware that a cognition has taken place. So it is an inference. And Murari Mishra also talks about a variant of Anuvyavasaya. Now, when we come to knowledge proper, how was it that Prama being how Prama originates and how Prama is being validated? Now, we'll have to speak about two levels, two tiers. First, at the first level, we speak about Pramanya Utpatti. How was it that knowledge being generated? And then we will have to know about the knowledge also. How is knowledge being generated? Two theories are prevalent. Pramanya Utpattihi Swataha, intrinsic origin of Pramanya, and Pramanya Utpattihi Parataha, extrinsic origin of knowledge. Now, the Swata theory, Pramanya Utpatti, Swataha, speaks about a causal complex which gave rise to cognition parallelly along with the cognition itself. The argument is that quite like mangoes are sweet or men are truthful and good, similarly, every cognition is naturally true and only external interference spoil it. This is the Swata theory. And Pramanya Utpattihi Parata, subscribed by Nayayikas, argue that one has to have an additional component to validate this Prama. Prama is not inherently true or false. Now, Pramanya Nyapti, when we come to knowing of knowing, which is very, very crucial. Actually, knowing of knowing, in fact, takes you to a metaphysical level, if you argue with me. So, how is it that we validate the truth? There are again two levels, the Swata and the Parata. Swata Pramanya Nyapti talks about, says that whatever causes the knowledge of the awareness causes by the same token the knowledge of its knowledgehood. All streams of Mimamsaka subscribe to this. And Parata Pramanya Nyapti speaks about subsequently, that is, once the knowledge has been arising, you need a pragmatic experience to validate it. It is called Samvadi Pravritti. Bauddhas also subscribe to this. They call it as Pravritti Samarthya. Both theories are actually similar and identical. Oh, there is power shortage. I do not know how long I can speak. So now what remains to be addressed is the last issue, namely, what is knowledge possible at all? Skeptics have been generally considered as intruders into the temple of truth, but not in India. Here, epistemologists and skeptics belong to the same clan because we are pretty aware that both of them have the same business. What is our business? To pursue knowledge. But nevertheless, Indian skeptics, there are some marked Indian skeptics. For instance, I'll enlist Nagarjuna, Jayaraji, Sri Harsha, some of them. And the critique they place to Nyaya is very valuable. And why do you think Nyaya has progressed so much? Because there were such active criticism placed against them. Otherwise, they would have been dormant, inactive, made them dynamic, and Nyaya has progressed so much. We should be greatly indebted to Nayayikas, Jainas, and Vedantins for making Nyaya progress to this extent. Nagarjuna in Vigraha Vyavartini literally shakes the foundations of Nyaya Pramana theory. He says that if Prameya is based on Pramana, what is it that Pramana is footed on? How do you establish Pramanas? Then Nayayikas would say that it is self-established, and they use the analogy of light. How quite like how light reveals itself, Pramana also reveals itself. Then Nagarjuna catch hold of them and say that the analogy is wrong. Light doesn't reveal itself. What is the function of light? To reveal in darkness. But where there is light, there is no darkness. And therefore, light doesn't reveal itself. That's a wrong analogy. And then they also argue that if Pramanas are self-supporting, as Nayayikas would say, why, if there is a possibility of something supporting itself, then why can't you start it a little early and then say that even Prameya is self-supporting? Subsequently, he exposes the very arbitrariness of the Pramana theory. He says that don't employ correspondence. Actually, what we should employ is coherence. Employ Pramana, but don't think that it reveals an independent material world outside. He says that the inherent value only make it the day-to-day world work smoothly and permit us to have subjective communication. There ends the matter. That is all that Pramanas are meant for. Actually, what happens is that it is the desire of the individual, according to Nagarjuna, that creates the prapancha. So there is the apparent correspondence is no correspondence. Actually, it is coherence that is at function. We start with certain beliefs and you apply to them. You want to see them in the world, and there is a constant adjustment taking place at the world and at the mental level. And at one point, we arrive at the fixed thing that you want to see, and thus you have the prapancha or the material world being created. With this, I come to a close. I have analyzed the major tasks undertaken by the Nyaya school before you. Hope you are impressed with this school, and please do have further readings on this, and I feel free to discuss with me. My mail ID is Sri_Kala_Nair at yahoo.com. If you forget this mail ID, you can Google me too. Thank you so much. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sreekala Nair, ma'am. It was an exhaustive exposition of the subject matter, epistemology of Nyaya, even if it was in a very crude form. I am very sure that the participants have benefited out of it. It opens scope for further investigations, and I hope our students and other interested participants will take it up. And once again, I'd like to propose a vote of thanks here, because like in spite of her busy schedule, she was kind enough to accept our invitation in the middle of her health conditions. Thank you so much, ma'am. There will be formal vote of thanks, but I like to propose mine in between. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now it is the time to have some responses or questions to Sreekala ma'am. So maybe we'll take 2-3 responses or questions to Sreekala ma'am. Those who want to ask questions or to make responses, they can openly they can unmute their mic and they can ask question directly to Sreekala ma'am. Thank you.
There are some questions that I have collected in the
Chat box.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
R. Indra has asked me, Nyaya's perception with Chavaka's perception, which one is valid? See, with regard to perception, there is no debate. But only with inference, Charvaka, that's very significant. The other day, I knew that Prasanna was very busy, but then still I was telling him about the great conclusions of Charvakas. That is, for the first time in the history of epistemology, global world, it was Charvakas who have brought in the inferential leap that I have talked about, critiquing inference. So Charvakas counter or criticize inference, enlisting the problems that you confront in inference, and they are very, very true. Yes. So that is it. And we Javaga's perception, which is nice presentation. Thank you. This is only one question. Is there any other question? I would like to hear the youngsters. Prasanna, enthuse your young minds to.
Yes, yes. Participants, they can
ask me
directly ask questions.
Yeah, they can ask me in Tamil also. I understand Tamil, but in English. Otherwise, you'll faint listening to my Tamil.
Yes, Badri.
I think Dr. Badri like to ask.
Hi, Badri. How are you?
Namaste, madam. Namaste. Just
Namaste.
no questions.
Thank you so much.
Excellent, wonderful lecture. From the student's point of view, madam, I was made to look like a student in rapt attention. Rapt attention, yes. Just
your master's lesson would have been brought live, right?
yes. From a student's point of view, what all should be covered, exhaustive analysis of Indian logic, Western logic, syllogism, I mean Indian syllogism, Hetu, Sadhya, Purvapaksha and others, and Western logic, yes, inference. Wonderful from a student's point. You have made me sit for 1.5 hours like a student, madam. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. If there is
I think really students should have listened, yes.
If there is nothing else, then why should we eat up the time of the next speaker?
Anant sir, would like to. Anant sir, you are mute. You are mute. Anant sir, you are mute.
Madam, what has been the contemporary philosophers' view on this Nyaya philosophy in their writings of contemporary philosophers? Have they mentioned, or they have approached it more problem-wise or tarka-wise?
Actually, post-colonial Indian philosophy, I have written recently somewhere, post-colonial Indian philosophy has generated great interest in Nyaya. I think Vedanta was not that way, though, a lot of talk was going on Vedanta. I don't see a lot of contribution being done in Vedanta. On the other hand, Nyaya is one school which has been immensely developed, and the whole country, it was, though, South hasn't contributed much to it. But then, of course, the East and a little bit of West, a lot of North, and reasonably South, particularly the Sanskrit scholars in Rashtriya Sanskrit Samsthan and all that. Nyaya has been discussed, and primarily for this reason, Navya Nyaya has been the language that has been adopted by Vedantans, everybody. So Nyaya, whether you like it or not, creep into your philosophical discussion. So to your question, I do not understand whom you mean by contemporary Indian philosophers. Well, there are different classes. If you mean the popular non-academic philosophers, well, non-academic philosophers will not be that way interested in Nyaya, but it's largely because it is very technical. Only the academic philosophers will be interested. And as far as the academic philosophy is concerned, I think post-colonial India has seen great attention being paid to the school, and I'm extremely happy about it. And my only worry is that very little of it has trickled down to the South. And now...
So I raised this question because of reading Stephen Pinker about how the cognition works. And so I just wanted to know if this cognition was taken up by the contemporary philosophers. And that's why I was just clearing my doubt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your question. Dear Panis sir, would you like to comment, or sir, you're on mute.
There is time. Okay, thank you very much for your very nice and excellent presentation. My congratulations to you. I have two short questions. One is with regard to the distinction which you made between the ontological presupposition of a philosopher and then the epistemological approach. During that discussion, you pointed out, or you rather argued, that that distinction is not that much necessary, if I understood you correctly. But what I would like to point out here is, in Indian philosophical tradition, of course, each and every philosopher, whether it is Indian or Western, they have a particular ontological commitment. But in Indian tradition, the distinction is very much stressed because the entire epistemological discourse is there in order to support the metaphysical claims. So the metaphysics comes first in Indian tradition, and the metaphysical claims are supported by epistemology. So the role of epistemology is unfortunately minimized in Indian tradition, whereas in Western tradition it is not so. And I feel that this is a problem, because if we claim that metaphysics is prior or is more important than epistemology, then the problem is that you can't have a neat system of philosophy, because your ontological position or metaphysical presupposition dominates. So this is my query. And second is, while talking about Shabda, you made the distinction between Laukika and Alaukika, wherein you pointed out that there is transcendental and immanent. It is argued that the empirical purposes we use our language. That's fine, absolutely fine. And in fact, this is the claim of philosophy of language in the West. So language is always used at the phenomenal level. That's fine. But fortunately or unfortunately, in Indian tradition, we extend the scope of language and we say it is transcendental in nature by involving some concepts which have no direct connection with our empirical knowledge. So what I always argue, that we take a leap from phenomenal language to the transcendental aspect of language, which is somewhat difficult to understand, because language is for the sake of our day-to-day communication and all that one. So empirical, this thing is because it is a language invented by us to serve our purpose, normal discourse. But in Indian, you extend the scope of language by saying it is transcendental, or it is also something which can transcend this empirical. So this is a little disturbing to me always. So what is your view?
Lovely. With regard to the first, thank you so much. With regard to the first about the ontological precedence of epistemology, now I'm sure you are also aware that this, the positivist claim of epistemology taking, this ancient Kantian, obsession of epistemology that has to have precedence over ontology, and they naively thought that it is a very innocent kind of an attempt, as though you have nothing in your mind, you pick up the tools and then you dig and then you go as much as the tools permit you, is not factual. By now, the West know it perfectly well. Recently, during the Nalanda dialogue, I was talking with Graham Priest, and I was typically asking him this question. Being a logician, I asked him, Professor, please, do you think that our logic has been, our epistemology has been tinged with ontology? He said, that should be a privilegious position. He says, tell me one logical position which doesn't have a metaphysical commitment. Take, for instance, the mathematical schools, the intuitionists, the formalism and all that. Each of them have their, see, you can't stand in the midair. That's not possible. As the positivists, naively have argued during the first part of the 20th century, that was a dream. if that dream realizes, like quite like correspondence. Karl Popper says that if you can meaningfully speak about correspondence, nothing like that. But the tragedy is that you can't, as again Nagarjuna has said. So the dream is fine, but then it is not realizable. So invariably there is this commitment, even commonsensical philosophy, and these are, of course, we have debated it several times ourselves. So there is always, even within realism, there is a commitment to ontology. So it's a naive perception that you do not have ontological. Ontology comes through back door invariably. Now everybody accepts this, and again, this is our tradition. See, the tradition is that epistemology, we don't do prayojana vichara is primary. Again, the West has argued that you pick up the prayojana vichara primarily, but that's not right. You do philosophical exercise for a particular purpose, and we are happy about it. We take privilege on that. Prayojana vichara comes in, and we announce that. Now, with regard to the second question, I think there is a slight misunderstanding. I haven't said that there is no language with the transcendental. I have said that with regard to the Shabda Pramana, when Shabda has been used, Shabda is not language. I don't mean Shabda language. Shabda is the method. So when you use Shabda as a method, there are two types of methods, the Vaidika and the Laukika. In both language function, both at the transcendental level, as you are absolutely right. Where else you have a fine example of language being elevated, as you have beautifully said, to the transcendental level, other than in the Indian tradition. So I did not say that only language has been implemented at the empirical level. Of course, language is prevalent, and we use language. The potencies of language is immensely used at the transcendental level. And this Akanksha Yogyata Sanidhi and Tatparya is only at the empirical level, when you use language in the minimal sense. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Ganesh Silva sir and Sriji, for your valuable questions. We are running short of time, so I think we'll move forward. Once again, thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us. Will you be continuing with us, ma'am?
Yeah, I will. I want to listen to the other people.
Okay. So we will reserve the formal vote of thanks towards the end. So we'll continue with our session. Thank you, ma'am. Now I request